week's episode of One Piece, the epic battle between Zoro and Pica finally comes to an explosive conclusion, which means we're this much closer to the main event of the Dressrosa arc. Luffy versus Doflamingo. That's right, my friends, Pica has finally been destroyed in this week's episode by the power of Zoro and his hockey-infused blades of badassery. The gist of this week's episode is very simple. Orlumbus throws Zoro at Pica, and Zoro completely annihilates him, making him reveal his true body so that he can finish him off with one Sanzen Sekai. That's pretty much the bulk of this week's episode, which unfortunately did have some pacing issues. That being said, what was in this episode was pretty freaking awesome if you just stop and think about it. Not to mention, Zoro looked really awesome when he was flying across the Dressrosa Kingdom as the hockey from his hands was being infused into his blades, turning them black. He looked pretty freaking metal. Not to mention the technique that he uses, which completely cuts Pica in half. The Santo Ryu Ogi Ichidai Sanshin Daisen Sekai. What a cool looking technique. Basically what Zoro is trying to do here is he's trying to keep Pica in the air. So first he cuts him in half, then he cuts him completely down the middle, then he cuts his arm off, and basically he's got Pica's body, his real body is stuck in his arm, and that's when he finally emerges and they decide to have one final face-off where Pica covers his entire body in hockey, and then he finishes him off with his Sansen Sekai. It's a pretty cool scene, and everybody's pretty shocked. But what I love most about it is that this is all happening in mid-air. They're basically fighting on Pica's arm, which has been completely chopped up into a lot of different pieces. Now, even after Pica has been defeated, his body is actually still getting ready to fall on King Riku and Usopp, who's totally pissing his pants this week. And that's where the big surprise of this week's episode comes in. Not only did Zoro get help from Orlumbus and his killer bowling technique, but we also had Elisabello do his King Punch. And I didn't imagine that it could actually work kind of like a big beam of destruction, because this thing flies across Dressrosa and just annihilates Pica's stone body. It's honestly in some ways a little cooler than what Zoro did. That being said, this week's episode was pretty frickin' manly. So what's the rundown on this week's episode of One Piece? A very simple episode, but a pretty satisfying one. This is an episode that I've been waiting to see for a long time, and it's not exactly what I was expecting. Like, I was always sort of hoping they would add a little bit more to the battle of Zoro and Pica, maybe a little more hand-to-hand combat, maybe he uses his swords a little bit more. But for manga purists, they are still going to like this episode because I really do think they did do it justice, especially the look of the hockey that was infused into his blades. That looked really freaking awesome. And I like the attention to detail, like when he's flying, just the intensity of the wind is like causing his lips to like flap up like a dog. What's most epic about this episode is when you really think about it is the biggest thing that we've seen in the series has officially been destroyed just by Zoro and his swords. This is a character who does not have a devil fruit, just his skills with a sword and the power of hockey. This is why Zoro is one of the most popular characters in the entire series, and I still would love just like a spin-off or like a movie or a special all about Zoro and his exploits, because damn, he is one of the most badass members of the Straw Hat Pirates, and it's completely demonstrated in this week's episode. That being said, this week's episode did have some pacing issues. It took nearly 15 minutes before we could even see Zoro do anything cool. This was basically right when Orlumbus threw him. And then the last couple of minutes was just him finishing off Pica. But what was here, I do think looked really awesome. I think they did pretty great justice to Zoro in the manga, especially the initial cut that he actually does on Pica. I love the look of all the different wind slashes going out through his body and the look of Zoro actually running through his torso. That looked really freaking great. There's also one small flashback which features the classic scene where Zoro met Dracula Mihawk for the very first time. Whenever they use Mihawk, I just want to see more from this character. He's one of the most oldest, mysterious characters we've seen from the series, and it's only a matter of time before he emerges from the shadows, and we get some sort of epic rematch between these two characters. I'd say it's safe to say that Zoro has come one hell of a long way since the way he was at the beginning of the series, and this episode was a great demonstration of that. So if you're a Zoro fan, and you want to just see him being plain badass, Check out this week's episode. I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5. It wasn't perfect, the pacing was all over the place, but the payoff was pretty freaking awesome. Before you guys leave today, I would love to hear your thoughts about this week's episode of One Piece. What did you think about the final battle between Zoro and Pica? Did you like his technique? Did you think it was really cool? Was there something about the episode you didn't really care for? What do you want to see from the rest of the One Piece anime series? Make sure to tell me in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching this video. Make sure to like it, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. That way you'll be able to see all of our latest anime and manga reviews and our weekly podcast show. You guys can also check us out on social media. Thank you guys again for watching, and as always, stay dandy, baby!